And here we are. I think the music's
I'm not letting you drive anymore. You drive too fast.
And here we are. Echo. What's happening? I think the music's
I'm not letting you drive anymore. You drive too fast.
And here we are. Echo. I think the music's
I'm not letting.
There we go.
Yeah. By Jove, we've got it.
I think we have straightened that out right
Definitely.
away.
Fear of God. That's what did it.
I have to find my my link to get back on the show. Well, welcome everybody. You can hear me, right? PK or no?
Yes, I can hear you. Definitely.
Okay. Well, here you are, and I will quickly join you. It is freezing cold here in Massachusetts again. We've just had it with this weather. We're just disgusted with it. And we're ready to see spring. And I know you were just talking about being in, what was it, 80-degree weather? Oh,
it was
my God.
82 on the back patio this afternoon.
Okay.
And I'm sorry to tell you that, but it was beautiful.
I'm glad to hear it.
As soon as you leave the sun, it's like anything else. The ground is cold. There's so much, And for me, of course, it takes me forever to thaw out.
Oh, I know. Well, I'm not thought out, but I am excited to be here because we have a terrific guest with a terrific topic that I know you and I have both talked about these types of things, Alchemical, Lightwork, for a long time. And we have a guest who's written a new book about it. So we want to know. We got to know what these symbols are, how to work with them, what they do for us, and why he got into it. We have so many questions for him. But first, we have big news from you. We have
not good news either.
Mercury again.
Mercury retrograde starting tomorrow, and it's in Pisces, so it doesn't go direct until March 20th. So the shadow period began actually February 11th, and the shadow period ends April 9th. And this retrograde is particularly tricky because it's in Pisces, and it's a little different than usual communications, retrogrades, all that good stuff. So the major issues right now are going to be confusion, foggy thinking, unclear facts, and it can be hard to separate truth from illusion. So likely being overly sensitive right now is going to make us overly emotional and have issues dealing with miscommunications. Gee, isn't that great during a retrograde?
Oh, yeah.
So the subconscious issues are going to surface, like old memories are going to pop up. We're going to have some issues with unresolved emotional issues are going to come back at us. But miscommunications and technical glitches, that's really going to be the big deal. So anything even involving travel, as well as disagreements, are going to pop up. So these are the areas that tend to get a little messy right now. So kind of guard yourself. Be a little kind to those around you because we're going through it, and so is everybody else.
Yes. And it's true. I was watching how Mercury makes us go back over things.
Oh, especially this one. Because it's all about the emotional side.
Yes. But even like we had this huge, supposedly it was going to be this big blizzard. Well, luckily New York and Rhode Island got hit worse than we did.
Right.
But still, we had a lot of cancellations, people needing to get to their medical appointments, and they were all canceled because of the weather. So here's Mercury in the shadow period, as you mentioned, which happens before Mercury actually takes hold.
And we'll also have a shadow period when it ends. So right now, somebody's poking us with a stick. That's all there is to it.
Yes, they're poking the wrong people.
Oh, for sure. But it's the foggy thinking that gets me so stressed out because it makes everything seem to be unclear. And of course, I'm working on the book right now. I keep redoing what I'm redoing because I'm redoing it.
Oh, your editor will be so proud. That's the good part. So dedicated.
Keep poking me with the stick. We'll make it yet.
Yes, exactly.
But I think one of the things that I thought about more than anything else with this retrograde is old memories and unresolved emotional issues. They're going to come out, and maybe we can clear them off and get rid of them once and for all.
Well, good.
Think in terms of that. But do be careful what you sign.
Okay. Not a good time to sign contracts, everybody. Right?
Huh?
Put it off if you can.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about our guest today.
Yeah, that's what I'm anxious for.
I know, me too. Dr. Arthur Versluis is president of the Heroes Institute, a nonprofit devoted to realizing the sacred in contemporary life. I love that.
Yes.
The former chair of the Department of Religious Studies at Michigan State University, he has written numerous books, including Sacred Earth and The Secret History of Western Sexual Mysticism, and his new book, Alchemical Lightwork. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Gorgeous cover. It is absolutely beautiful. You just want to pull it right off the shelf and buy it because it's gorgeous. So let's bring him on. I want to hear what he has to say. Hey, Arthur, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
But it's great having you here. You're taking on a big mystery, and we want to know why. What made you get into this?
Well, there are a couple different aspects. Part of it is goes back some decades now. About 3 decades ago, I gave a talk in Minnesota, and after the talk, this fellow came up to me and said, and he had this manuscript under his hand, under his arm, and he introduced himself, and he's the figure that I mentioned in the book. He's a practicing alchemist, and he's been practicing now for almost all of his life, and also a clinical psychologist. And so I've worked with him for quite a few years, and we've been friends for just as long. And so as much as anyone, he's responsible for what's in the book, which is really the application of alchemy as a practice to contemporary life. So that's really the genesis of the book. Alchemy not as an arcane practice in a laboratory using herbs and chemicals, although that exists, and metals, but working with alchemy and alchemical principles for contemporary life and for application to the kind of world we find ourselves in, where Mercury goes retrograde and Saturn and Neptune are conjunct, and all kinds of unusual things ensue and challenges in that kind of world. How do we deal with things? Well, that's what this book is about.
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, it's alchemy. These types of alchemical treatises aren't they really meant for personal transformation? Wasn't that the real secret about them? Is it's not about doing anything out there. It goes in here. That's where the work should be. And these symbols are geared towards that. Is that the case?
Well, that's certainly part of it. But there are different kinds of alchemy. There really is alchemy working with herbs and tinctures. I was talking with a Czech alchemist, and he in the conversation on video, he lifted up a bottle of tincture that he had made, and it's very real. There really are people working with metals, so I don't want to discount that, because it's possible to work with these things, but it's also possible to apply alchemical principles to our own lives in the contemporary world. And that's what this book really is about, even though these other kinds do exist and are quite valuable, actually.
Yes, I would think so. Well, yes. I mean, we've talked about monatomic gold and all kinds of alchemical formulas that are supposed to help people to awaken. And I've tried a bunch of them, and some of them really do help. Some of them, it's like a rocket booster type. So yeah, I guess there are people out there who know how to make these elements, and it's fun to try them and see what's what. But it sounds like you know the real deal. You know these people who really know what they're doing, who've been doing it for a very long time, and I don't know if it's commercially produced or not, but it sounds really mysterious. Yeah, it sounds like only the lucky ones like you, Arthur, might get to see them in their bottles and maybe use them. Have you used them?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've done different kinds of alchemical, practices working with herbs. I started working with herbs when I was just after high school, actually, gathering herbs and creating different remedies. Because really, what you can do with herbs is restore health, and you see that in Vedic, Ayurvedic tradition. That's a tradition that really emphasizes working with herbs, and it helps. It's complementary to other approaches that are from the West, and so it's very beneficial to be able to work with both at the same time and fill in the gaps, as it were. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really about health and restoring health to work with those kinds of things. There's also another somebody else I know who has worked in the same way with Tibetan and other
Oh.
alchemical practices from Asia, and some of the things that he has produced are really quite, just as you say, quite remarkable in their effects, and it's noticeable. But it's very subtle. It's often very subtle. Herbs are not like prescription drugs where you take it and all kinds of uh, rather strong effects can happen. With herbs, it's often very subtle, and that's part of how it works. It's not the same as pharmaceuticals.
No, it's not. I think it's more like a subtle signal to bring your body back into balance rather than, I think a lot of medications, as helpful as they can be, especially in critical situations, are more like an attack on the body itself. And it's very hard uh, to deal with that because so many drugs have so many side effects. When you're dealing with herbs, you don't run into that unless you're allergic to the herb, which is a totally different thing. But you have this magnificent herb that's been cured and prayed over or whatever, exposed to certain symbols. So it carries in a frequency. And that frequency is what's treating your health issues, right?
Well, that's one way you could describe it, and there are different ways of describing it. Actually, describing uh, different sorts of what sometimes is called spagyric. That's another word for working with herbs. And there's a practitioner named Manfred Junius who did quite a bit of work with that. Manfred also uh, worked with herbs, and I'm not sure he would use the term frequency, but he would definitely refer to subtle or um, subtle, or I'm not sure quite what the word is, but um, the effects are not the same as with pharmaceuticals. That is for sure.
Yes,
Because
yes.
it's a restoration. It's a restoration of health,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's very different.
it's
Yes.
very different. That's true.
Yeah, makes a big
It's so
difference.
cool. Yeah, that's amazing. So you've experienced some of these personally
Yes.
and stories
However,
to share.
the tradition that is in the book and that the book is focused on is really not about working with herbs or working with metals or doing laboratory work, which is the kind of thing that really we're talking about. Um, it's a tradition that started in about 1600, roughly, and it has a long history, obviously. It's a synthetic tradition. It draws on different others, including alchemy, in order to uh, explain a spiritual process. And that spiritual process is alchemical, meaning it is a process of transformation that we can understand in terms of being in darkness, the black or negredo. Then there's another phase, which is the breaking in of the light, which is sometimes called albedo, meaning white. And then there's also the red phase, which is the phase of flowering. And so you have this kind of, it's akin to a seed in the ground, which is in darkness. And then it pokes its head up above the ground and it's in light. And then it begins to rise up and flower. And that same process, that natural process, we can experience for ourselves. That's what the book is partly about, is about that, which is really a natural process. So this kind of alchemy is it existed in a Christian context primarily, and it's in the Christian theosophic tradition, but there are forms of spiritual alchemy also and also plant and metal alchemy in India. So it's both Indian and European, Indo-European, you could say.
So there's a real power to these symbols too. Is this something that you have when you work with it, when you work with the symbols, and what happens? I mean, does it lead you into deeper places within your own psyche? What does it do for you?
Well, the book is about the reason it has the title Alchemical Lightwork is that light is so fundamental to all different or many different religious traditions. So many different traditions around the world recognize that light, illumination, enlightenment are all tied together. And so the book is about the invocation of light, which is alchemy. When you're talking about these different colors, these different symbols, symbolic colors, the different images that are based on those symbolic colors of darkness and light and red, gold, those colors are inflections of an underlying primordial light. And so alchemy is about invoking light in order to transform ourselves. And so how do we do that? We invoke light because it's a natural part of who we are as human beings living in the world under the sun in light. And by invoking light, you're also able to manifest light. And that's really what alchemy is about in terms of transformation. So the book has really three different parts. One is or three different aspects. One is individual, so it's about us as individuals, and our working through our own, you could say, burdens we carry, the challenges that we have in the world, the things we inherit, the difficulties, and we all experience that. We all have histories and difficulties. And how do we get beyond that? Invoking light, invoking what is beyond us. In the Christian tradition, it's the light of Christ. In Hermetic tradition, it's the light of Hermes. And in other traditions, it's associated with other figures. As in Tibetan Buddhism, it would be Padmasambhava or Guru Rinpoche. But in all cases, invoking light from beyond ourselves in order to get beyond and transform our circumstances is part of the tradition.
So you mentioned that you have a friend who is an alchemist and a psychologist, which is an incredibly interesting combination. So
definitely,
what have you learned about this level of high symbolism and what it can do in terms of transforming people?
Well, he comes from a perspective of psychology because, of course, that's his training, and he used this in his psychological counseling practice, so that in marriage counseling, then it's a way of explaining and also understanding mapping what's happening in our own lives, because it's not only about us, it's also about us as couples. So it's possible to draw on this practice in your relationship, and then in community. And in community, it's beyond us, even as a couple. It's about a group of people, so it's beyond us. And there's very little written about this. Actually, this book is the only one I know that discusses alchemical practice in terms of the group. And I give an example of an actual group, which is at the end of the book. It's in an appendix. There's actually a couple appendixes, and they give different kinds of examples. But one of the examples is just mind-blowing. It's from about 1700, and it's amazing. I mean, his group was having telepathic experiences. This is a guy writing about this in England. It's 1700, and he's writing about telepathic, clairvoyant experiences, and how the group is able to perceive each other's experiences and things like that, which are really a deepening of connection, which is also what it's about in terms of couple relationship, because really in the modern world we don't have very good maps for things. So we don't really have a map for these higher dimensions and how we transform not only ourselves, but in a relationship. How do you understand the relationship as including elements of transcendence? And alchemy gives you at least a map for transformation, but it also gives you practices, and it gives you a kind of map for understanding the larger picture. So that's been really helpful for me, and it's also been helpful for him in terms of his psychology practice, his psychological counseling.
So can you walk us through what something like that would look like? You said it's been helpful to you in your world and your personal experience. So how do you use these symbols? How do you work with them so that you have this really, obviously you have a close relationship with this whole field, but break it down for the average person who's not familiar with this. How does it work?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of things that I can say about it at the beginning, and one ties into another book that I published recently, which is called Breaking Through the Materialistic Deception. And that book, in that book, I discuss how deeply embedded our whole worldview is in the modern world in terms of materialism, how overpowering that mentality is. I didn't realize it, actually. I understood it in a general way, but I really didn't fully understand it until I wrote the book. And the materialistic deception, I call it that because it's a self-deception. We in some sense deceive ourselves, although around us there's so much emphasis on materialistic understanding of the world. So by that I mean believing that only the physical is real, that only chemicals, and people all the time in the university say, well, your brain is your consciousness. That's it. Your brain, it's just chemicals and so on. This is very common, and that it's so pervasive. And so the beginning of this practice of this kind of worldview is to start to realize that pervasive materialism, which is everywhere in how we see the natural world, in how we see each other, is wrong. It's just incorrect. It's an incorrect understanding. So that's actually the beginning. How do you begin to break through the materialistic deception? Well, to give an example, the natural world, in alchemical understanding, there are three different aspects to what makes a culture, to what makes the world around us. One is, of course, nature, but connected to that is the realm of the spirit, and spirits. And then the third is the human, and the interconnection of those is what creates a culture. And so what do we need to do? Well, first thing is to be in the natural world and begin to recognize that it is not just a collection of objects. It's not a collection of objects to be
Right.
tokenized in a in a crypto world or a digital world. It is not uh, separate from us completely. It is actually interwoven with us. And so, being in nature, being in the natural world, being under the sun, and beginning to recognize that there are spirits in nature, this is very widely understood in European tradition, in Buddhist tradition, Asian religious traditions, in Native American traditions, that nature includes spiritual beings. And so that's part of this tradition. And that's the beginning, actually, is to begin to realize that everything that we've been taught from a completely materialistic worldview is incorrect. It is just too limiting. And
Mhm.
so that is the first step. And without that step, which uh, many people actually don't take, your audience, I'm sure, and you are unusual in this regard. But let me tell you, many of my students do not have any idea that um, uh, these traditions even exist unless
Really?
I bring it out, unless I tell them. Yes, unless they
Really
take my
sad.
course,
It's
they wouldn't
amazing.
come in knowing any of this.
And how old are your students? Are they between 18 and 20? Is that their age group?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, 18 to
Yeah, that's
22.
really disturbing that they don't have any knowledge of this.
No,
You would think that
all
they do.
kinds of that they wouldn't have knowledge of. That's just how it is.
Just how it is. Gosh. Oh
Yeah.
my. Well, thank goodness for you that you can teach them something of value like this. Do you get a lot of enthusiasm from your students?
Yeah, I've taught courses that right now I'm teaching actually a course in social enterprise and creating a social enterprise, a nonprofit, how to create nonprofits that have a social enterprise dimension. But I also have taught courses in history of religion, history of alchemy, history of magic and mysticism, and topics like that. And
Hmm.
students are extremely interested in it. So there definitely is a hunger for uh, deeper kind of knowledge and learning about things that people haven't learned about before, that there's just no knowledge of. And nobody would teach history of alchemy or today, very little. So, what my book is actually meant for a general reader outside the university. Of course, I teach in a
Mhm.
university
Mhm.
and I
Right.
teach from an academic perspective, but this book is for a general reader. And it's meant for somebody who's seeking and maybe struggling, and you need to find your way. And this book is meant to encourage you to do that. And so that's a different thing than university
Mhm.
uh, work, and so I'm making that clear. They're different worlds, but they cross over somewhat, of course.
Yeah, of course. Well, again, thank you for doing the work that you're doing to introduce students to this. I mean, I remember a million years ago when I was at Boston College, there was actually a course being taught on Carlos Castaneda's work. All of that, dreaming, shamanism. It was great. I mean, there was such a huge interest. I would say throughout our entire culture, that book came out. Every book he wrote was on the New York Times bestseller list. So I was always hopeful when I saw that it was going to continue, kind of pick up speed, and I think in some ways it has, but it's more on the ghost busting side and all of that, rather than looking at some of the history, the ancient history of this, the power that comes with something like this. So it's really exciting that you're teaching this and people are interested. Young
Yep.
people are interested in it. Good. Glad to hear it.
Yeah, I teach a course in shamanism as well. You know,
Oh, okay.
history of shamanism, and you know, those are that, you know, the anthropology kind of course that you mentioned, it would be uh, maybe somewhat analogous, but really I'm focusing on the main shamanic tradition and then its modern forms. And those kinds of things are really uh, you know, they're fun to do. It's fun to be able to, enjoyable to be able to teach that kind of subject, but there's not a lot of it out there, I have to say. If you look proportionately at the what's out there, there's very little of the kind of thing that you or I would be interested in. But every now and then there might be a course that somehow gets in there,
Yeah.
and you know, I think that's there's a student group focused on paranormal phenomena, and that so you know uh, uh, there is student interest, and there are things that they can sometimes pursue, but the kind of thing that's in this book, probably there are some illustrations in this book which include a sequence of images which show a man and a woman going. It's a manuscript that actually is from Scotland that has never been published before uh, in its in color sequence, and it shows a couple, a king and a queen, joining together and then actually transforming in the sequence. And the final image is Christ rising from the tomb. In other words, the sequence of male and female and the different colors and the natural imagery leads ultimately to eternal life. That's one way of understanding that sequence. So it's something that I would discuss in an academic way, uh, in an academic article or something, but here it's included in order to show the tradition and this kind of individual and couple transformation, which is possible actually.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. So, sounds like they have a lot to show interest in about on this subject. But it is mysterious still. It remains a mysterious topic to this day, understanding the symbols and really what they mean. So for our audience, getting this book would be very enlightening because they would be able to understand more about it. It would be less of a mystery, something they could actually understand and apply to their lives if they were so inclined. Right. They could do that with this book.
Yeah, that's true. And uh, it goes through different phases. It's organized in around the oldest alchemical text in the Western world, which is the Emerald Tablet. And the Emerald Tablet is this, you mentioned mystery. It's a mysterious document which includes sayings like what is above is like what is below is like what is above.
Right.
That
Right.
It is the source of alchemical tradition in many respects. And so each chapter I have a quotation from a new version of that Emerald Tablet. And you're right, it's mysterious what it's talking about. It's enigmatic. It's like a puzzle. Each sentence is like a puzzle. And I don't explain the puzzle, but I draw on it in order to make to develop the different chapters. So it was really enjoyable to work on this book, and it's been enjoyable to talk about it with people.
What is it that you want people to get out of this? What do you want them to walk away with from your book?
Well, one of the things is that there is a map that alchemy provides, which is applicable in different ways to not only to our own immediate lives, but also to our larger understanding of how we can transform and understand transformation in different religious contexts. So what the book is drawing on primarily, although not exclusively, is Christian. Actually, alchemy exists. There are forms of alchemy in Islam. So there's Islamic alchemy, there's Hindu alchemy, there's Buddhist alchemy. Buddhist alchemists, I give an example of one. And so the book gives you a map that is applicable regardless of the specific religious tradition you're working in. And so it gives you a map, a way of understanding what the purpose of life is, really, what the means of transformation is, and how to map that from darkness through light into flowering. So that's really the key thing that I'd like people to be able to come away with.
So the map is very important. So it shows you where you are in life and where you might be able to go, should you choose. Maybe. Yeah.
My part. Yeah.
I know you and I have talked about these symbols for a long time. What the heck do they mean? You know, what is this about? They're ancient. Okay, what do you do with them? So this is why it's really great to have you here to tell us more in detail.
Definitely.
About it, because it is to us still mysterious. I mean, we understand the conjoining and the male and female coming together and all of that about energy. You know, the male and female energy coming together. And tell us more. I mean, we want to know more of the mystery of this. Unveil it. Tell us. We want to know. And we did, just so you know, we didn't get your book in time to read it, but we did get a PDF. But what they do is they stamp all over these things.
Right.
And they can't read it. So we were so frustrated because
my heart goes out to you. I know exactly what you're referring to.
You know. Yes, so like the gorgeous cover. Okay, what happens on the inside? So they're just preventing us reaching this wisdom in your book.
Well, you were talking earlier about Mercury retrograde, and the book and the alchemical tradition. I will say, this alchemical tradition in particular draws on planets and planetary symbolism in order to understand ourselves. And so what are the planets in this tradition? Well, it's the same as in astrology. So it's drawing on the mythical dimensions of the planets. So Saturn as restriction, Saturn as that which is connected to Earth, but also to holding back, discipline, and so forth. Mercury, Mars, Venus, each of the planets, the classical planets, appears inside the human body in a sequence. And so there are illustrations. I didn't include them in this particular book, but there are illustrations that show these planets inside the body, inside the human body, as aspects of how we begin to wake up. So it's in a kind of spiral form, which mirrors the process, the alchemical process of transformation or illumination. And so that understanding of astrology is different than sometimes the way people discuss it, because here it's internalized as a mythical system for understanding ourselves and our own way of waking up. And so I actually am involved in a co-authored book, which will go into much more detail on this specific planetary set of connections to the alchemical process. I do discuss it in Alchemical Lightwork. Despite the stamping on there, it's still in there, and you'll see it about halfway through. It's about halfway through, and I discuss this planetary sequence, and people often in the modern world are very dismissive of astrology, and they're dismissive of it because it is the dismissal comes from explicitly materialistic, dualistic premises, which are the underpinnings of the modern world. That's why I said breaking through the materialistic deception is beginning to recognize that other things are real than we might have previously thought. And astrology is a way within this tradition of understanding through mythical archetypes our own nature and how it wakes up naturally. What is the process that we go through? And what the process we go through is for the dark or destructive tendencies need to be counterbalanced by light. And that light is also connected to love. And so that's why Venus and the moon are the softening energy for the harshness of Mars and the harshness of Saturn. And so it's not that the light makes the darkness completely go away exactly, in the sense that Saturn no longer exists. Saturn still exists, but Saturn is balanced by Venus, by the female light. And so that is kind of a thumbnail version of a process which is actually quite long and involved, and we discuss it in a number of chapters. We actually have like 4 chapters discussing this process.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it's a big undertaking. I mean, because you're talking about a complete balancing of your own ecosystem, right? Because get out of balance here, day and night, getting out of balance. So it's a lot to be done. But if you understand this on this level, then it does give you something so much more to work with. Instead of, as you talk about the materialistic world, we're all, taught to be incredible consumers and little else. So this opens up a whole other network of understanding, which is exciting that your students get to have a bit of this.
Definitely.
Yeah. So again, I think it's great that you're still in there teaching it, hopefully opening some minds up to more of a balanced experience of themselves and life. Was there anything when you were writing this book that really surprised you?
Well, when I write a book, it's a process that also comes through you. In other words, of course, I write the book, I'm writing it, but at the same time, it is a synthesis of all kinds of things, and it isn't entirely your own creation in some sense. And by that, I don't mean plagiarism. I mean that there's something mysterious about the way a book comes out and the way it emerges. And in this particular book, what I started with was not exactly what I ended up with, because the way the book manifested was part of itself a natural process, in which I didn't initially intend for the different elements that did finally come together in this interconnection to be interwoven in the way that they were. It's in some sense they interwove themselves, and I was the intermediary for doing that, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah. So that's the thing that
understand that, PK, because you're writing a book now, so you see how it's coming together.
Yes.
In a similar way. But yeah, I mean, you're kind of drawing in from the energy of all these symbols, and they're not stagnant. I mean, these symbols are, I would try to describe it this way. I think they're giving off an energy, a signal, a frequency, it's something that goes beyond just a picture. And they're more important than that, right? Yes, maybe. I think they
Well, yeah, you wanted to say something?
No,
Miss
I'm
No.
listening.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Very,
Well, I would say that there are all different aspects that came together in that book. And about three, maybe right toward the end, I started writing what essentially was a short story. And it just emerged. And so I asked the publisher, should we keep this in? And they said, sure. And so, and so it's essentially the beginning of a novel. It's the beginning of, it's fictional in some sense. And I didn't expect that. I didn't anticipate that that was going to be part of the book. It just emerged, and it comes in as an example or a
That's
kind of manifestation of the the latter part of the book, which is about alchemical community. Because I think we're moving toward, and we're actually in a very turbulent period right now, and we're moving into an even more turbulent period. And so, what's on the other side? How do you get to a place of community and stability that transcends the kind of chaos that we're seeing emerge in the modern world? And alchemy provides a way of understanding community in that way. And so that story that's in there is also, it's like very short, but it's exemplary of the same kind of community in the future that also existed in 1700 in a very different way. So it gives you the past and the future at the end of the book. And so what happens in essence is when you're writing, all of these different elements come together from your own past, from your experience. And so all of that is woven into this book in a way that I think is accessible to people.
So what do you see happening? What do you see down the road? You know that what we're in now, you're watching it closely, I'm sure. What do you see ahead?
Well, at some point, there is going to be a social uh, a really significant social disruption. The kind of systems that we've developed in the modern world are so fragile, and we don't really realize it, but you realize it every now and then when, when the supply chains break, right? When suddenly in the supermarket, the shelves are empty, right? It's like,
Yes,
what? Suddenly there's no toilet paper. There's
right.
no,
Very
right?
bad.
Yeah, it happens. You think it only happened in 2020. Well, guess what? It happens now. Everything is so fragile. And so at some point that fragility is going to break. What's on the other side of that? How do we begin to rebalance and create a more balanced way of being in the world? One that's more in harmony with nature, with these three realms: the realm of spirit, spirituality, the realm of nature, and the human realm interwoven. I have an image in the book, which is it's an image of the three different aspects, and it's geometric image, but really you have to have those three aspects to have a culture. And if we're in a world that does not really recognize the deeper aspects of nature, or that there's a spiritual dimension to the world, then what do we have? We have a flat materialistic worldview in society that cannot sustain itself ultimately. It cannot, because a, a balanced way of being in the world, a sustainable way of being, requires understanding that nature is not just an object to be exploited. It's
Right.
not just a collection of objects. And our society does not do that. So how do we create one that actually does? That's part of what this book is about. It's about how we create culture on the other side of some of the things that are coming. So that's an aspect. It's an underlying aspect, but it's very real. It's
Yes,
it's very real in terms of what's in that book. So yeah.
Now, with the different symbols that you are talking about that are in your book, is it helpful for people to make copies of those symbols and look at them, meditate with them, to try to understand or immerse themselves in their meaning? What's a good way to work with the symbolism of these things?
Well, I've actually created a couple of online courses for people. One is on this book. Actually, it's tied to this book, and it goes through different images, and it has different sections to work with within this tradition. And so that's at the website Hyros.institute. And there's a second course that I have also put up, or actually we have put up, which is about working with different images. And it's a course in Christian mysticism called The Short Way. And it's the only course of its kind, actually. I did it in tandem with the psychologist that I mentioned, clinical psychologist. He and I worked on different aspects of that. I don't get any personal income from this, by the way. There's a small fee for the courses, but it's to support the site, which requires, it requires paying people to make sure that it functions, because it's actually kind of complicated behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So I don't get anything personally from it, but it is, I think, a way to answer the question that you had, which is, how do you work with this? Well, the answer is you can go to these courses, and this one course tied to this book in particular, and it takes you through how to work with these different images and how to do that in the modern world, how to do that, how to begin to work with nature in a different way.
Wow, so that's wonderful. How much does it cost to do one of these courses?
$49, I think, something like that. It's not a lot. It's not.
Yeah,
I've seen online courses that are like $1,500, $3,000, and so on. It's just to support the infrastructure of the site, actually. That's really, and to make it available.
Well, that's important, I think, because otherwise people would know how to work with them. And so this way they get ideas, support, and an actual math, again, to be able to do that. Now, how can they sign up? Is it right on that site? Hyros.
Yeah.
What is it? .com?
Yeah. There's a pop-up on there, and you can find it at the bottom of the screen. There's a link at the bottom of the site. When you come in, at the bottom of the screen, there's actually links, or there should be.
There better.
There should be. I say that because
a link for the link.
The infrastructure for these things is so complicated
that
it's comical at this point. It's like this Frankenstein monster to run a website.
Yeah, especially with these images. I mean, it's just, well, it's so nice that, again, you're offering further exploration for people with this, with guidance. And I think people need the guidance. Otherwise, they're left to their own devices, and they'll feel like they're not getting anywhere with it. So this is a good way to go for anybody who wants the book and the course. It makes a nice combination.
Oh, definitely.
So, yeah, that's a really good way to do this. But I'm still left with so much mystery. I'm going to have to talk to your publicist. She's going to have to send us the books. So
definitely.
Read them cover to cover like we planned. And then we may have to come back and talk to you again with our questions about how do you work with this again? Because what did they do in ancient times with these symbols? They had groups, right? Groups of people who basically owned these things. They didn't distribute them to the masses.
Well, they're in the book. What I'm discussing in part is the practice of invocation of light, and in the book we have forthcoming, we go through in considerable detail exactly how you do this, what you do, and what. But the essential practice is invoking or envisioning and concentrating or contemplating on light and on illumination, on divine light, and manifesting that in the world around you. And that's in a nutshell what the book is about. But the book, in terms of practice, is very extensive. This is several hundred pages, and it came out of conversations that we did. So that is for the future. But for right now, Alchemical Lightwork is the best general introduction to this that there is. There's never been a book that deals with these different aspects of this tradition in this way. So I'd encourage people to take a look at it. You can take a look at what's on the Inner Traditions website, which is created by, it's actually infrastructure is Simon and Schuster. And that's a very good site to get the book from, because it goes directly to the publisher and it doesn't go to these intermediaries. So I recommend that. Keep an eye out for this book coming in the future, because I think you'll find that answering some of your questions in terms of the deeper elements of this. And this book, the one that's coming, really the likes of which has never been done before, because these manuscripts, you're right, it's often very mysterious and very difficult to understand. It's referring to drawing on this kind of chemical or this kind of metal and doing this. It's very mysterious sometimes.
It is,
but
yeah.
It is. But this book is actually making it as clear as I could make it in terms of the overview, and some practitioners have been kind enough to give some good positive comments about it, which leads me to think it must have some merit. So
I'm sure.
So I appreciate that.
Oh yes, I will look forward to this next book, and then we're going to have you back, and we're going to have to get the book this time, right? Because
so.
it's a fascinating subject, and it's been steeped in so much secrecy and mysticism that is difficult, I think, for most people to understand. But there's something there, and we want to have you bring it forth so that our audience can learn about it and use it to their advantage, and to bring more light into the world, their personal world and the rest of the world. I mean, I think it's great what you're doing. So when is this next book coming out, Arthur?
Well, I would guess probably 2027. So it'll be a while. It'll be a while.
Just around the corner.
Yeah.
All right, we'll wait. We will wait.
But in due time, in due time.
So, okay, I'll tell Gail to notify us so that we can have you on first thing when that book drops. So,
definitely.
Okay,
great.
That sounds good.
Yes, and thank you so much for coming on the show tonight and talking with us about this great topic. And Amanda, if you can put that up one more time before we have to say goodnight to everybody. Again, the cover is so gorgeous. Look at that. Yes. Alchemical Lightwork, everybody. Beautiful book. And more to come. More to come. So we will be back next week with another great show. Next week, we've got the famous Barbara Graham. She is back, and she is going to be doing readings for free for those people who want to call in. We will have a phone line available, and we are going to have a blast. So make sure you join us next week live. And until then, we will see you on the Blue Highway. Good night, everyone.
Good night.